This is Woodwork for Humans, the series where we make great things out of wood using a low-tech, low-cost approach. And over the last couple of months, we have made some fantastic projects. But everything that we've done is still raw wood. And in this video, we're going to explore a whole bunch of products and techniques that are going to seal and protect that wood and give it a luster that's going to last for years. Because, honestly, if your project is just raw wood, it's not really done. I guess that's why they call this stuff finish. There are so many finishes and finishing recipes out there that it's easy to get overwhelmed. But I do a ton of woodworking, and I do 90% of my finishing with just 3 products. Oil-based satin polyurethane, clear shellac, and boiled linseed oil handle pretty much every finishing situation that I come across. And you can also divide these finishes into 2 simple groups. These 2 over here are what we might call film finishes. They leave a hard, protective coating on top of the wood. This last finish, and a bunch of others like it, are oil finishes. They soak into the wood, and they don't leave much of a coating on top. So with a product like boiled linseed oil, it's easy to wonder, if it doesn't leave a protective film on top of the wood, why bother? Well, a lot of reasons. For one thing, linseed oil and other oil finishes are super fast. So my wife might come home from work one day and say, hey, one of my coworkers has a birthday tomorrow and I don't have anything to give her. Could you make something quick? Well, no problem. I'll grab a nice offcut of wood and maybe turn a little decorative bowl on the lathe. Now, a project like this has to be ready the next day, or sometimes the same day. There's no time to put on several coats of a film finish. The great thing about boiled linseed oil is that I can wipe on one coat, let it soak in for a couple of minutes, wipe it off, finish it up with a little bit of paste wax on top, and I'm done. There's literally no drying time. And with about 15 minutes of time finishing, I have something that I can just hand directly to the recipient, and I don't have to worry about whether the finish is still tacky or soft. It's complete. Boiled linseed oil is also great at rejuvenating old wood. I restore a lot of old tools, like this little keyhole saw. And the wood parts of these tools, like the handles, are usually in terrible shape from being neglected for years. I'll scrape and sand off the finish, but then the wood underneath is all dried out and dusty, and it also looks pale. Everything about it needs help. Well, boiled linseed oil can fix all of these problems. Not only does it darken the wood and make it look nicer, but it also makes little cracks and things in the surface swell shut. It literally hydrates the wood and makes it kind of new again. With an undercoat of boiled linseed oil, this tool handle is going to be ready for a film finish later on. Now, even if you plan on using a film finish on your project, boiled linseed oil can still help the project look better by darkening and accentuating the grain. So we just finished making this simple dovetailed pine box a couple weeks ago. And it looks nice and crisp, but the wood is pale and kind of lacking in character. Well, linseed oil can fix that. As it goes on, it darkens the wood, and it also accentuates the contrast between the light and the dark grain. It makes the whole thing just look richer and more interesting. Boiled linseed oil is also compatible with almost every finish, so you can use it underneath almost any film finish. It's also easy to apply. For this box and for the saw handle, I'm just going to apply my linseed oil with a simple cloth rag. I'll fold it together so that all the ragged cut edges are on the inside, and I have a nice, neat little pad. I apply the linseed oil heavily, and I put extra on the end grain where it's going to soak in a lot. I wait about 10 minutes and wipe off any excess. You can repeat if you want to, but I don't usually see much benefit to multiple coats. I just do one and then move on. If you want to apply a film finish on top of linseed oil, just wait overnight, and then you can put on almost anything you like. Now, there is one problem with finishes like boiled linseed oil and polyurethane, which is that they heat up as they dry. So if you've got a rag soaked with these finishes and it's all bundled together and it's heating up, it might spontaneously combust, which would be especially bad if you had thrown it into a trash can full of wood shavings. So don't do that. You need to be careful with these finishing supplies. A lot of people will take their finish-soaked rags and put them in an airtight jar or a bucket full of water. I usually just spread them out flat on a cement floor, let them dry overnight, and then I can throw them away safely. But you need to do what's right for you and your shop. Be safe. Research the products that you're using. Once you've mastered boiled linseed oil, you can move on to an easy film finish like shellac. This is one of my absolute favorite finishes because it's easy to work with, it dries super fast, it's non-toxic as soon as it cures, and it's pretty durable. You can mix your own shellac by buying it in flakes and then mixing it with denatured alcohol. But honestly, I like the convenience of the stuff in the can, so I pretty much always just buy that. For a little job like this tool handle, I'll make myself a fresh cloth applicator, dip it in the finish, and wipe on one light coat. I only have to let it dry for 10 minutes, and then I quickly scuff it with quadruple zero steel wool, wipe off the dust, and then add another coat of shellac. After 10 more minutes, it's dry. I can rub on a little paste wax, also with steel wool, buff it with a soft cloth, and it's done. You can really see the difference between the original finish of the saw handle and what I got after boiled linseed oil and shellac. And there's something about shellac that makes it just feel perfect for tool handles. It's great in the hand. And if it's durable enough for a tool handle, it's probably durable enough for almost any project. Shellac also brushes nicely, and it's easy to apply. Here, I'm using a synthetic nylon brush that I just picked up at the home center. I'm putting the shellac on over the boiled linseed oil that I applied yesterday. I'm doing one light, even coat, and then letting it dry before I do anything else. Shellac dries so quickly that it's hard to go back and fix mistakes that you make. So if you have a tiny dry spot or something, just leave it and get it on your next coat. The wood on this box felt nice and smooth after the first coat, so I didn't scuff or sand in between coats. It's important to use your judgment when you're finishing. You know more than you think you do, and if you use common sense, you'll probably get good results. I give the second coat 10 minutes to dry, and then I scuff it flat with quadruple zero steel wool. Then I also apply my paste wax with steel wool. I just keep a chunk of steel wool in the wax can all the time and use it for pretty much every product. I let the wax dry for a few minutes, and then I buff it with a soft cloth. Given that this finish only took me about half an hour to put on from beginning to end, it's really amazing the depth, luster, and protection that I got out of a cheap and easy finish like shellac. Anytime one of my projects needs maximum protection, I go straight to oil-based polyurethane. Poly also comes in water-based, and water-based polyurethane is an excellent, easy finish, but it's a little bit less durable than oil-based, and it's really, really clear. Oil-based polyurethane gives your work a slight amber hue, and I think that pretty much always makes things look nicer. Now, the problem with oil-based polyurethane is that it is a giant pain to clean it off of brushes. You have to use mineral spirits and then soap and water. It's a whole process. And most people will tell you that you can't apply oil-based poly with disposable foam brushes because you'll get bubbles in the finish. Personally, I get around this problem by just thinning out my polyurethane about 10% with mineral spirits. I do this with every variety of oil-based poly that I use, and I find it always works well. There's no need to measure or follow a recipe here. Just add about 10% mineral spirits, stir it in, and look for the poly to seem a little bit thinner. If it's thinner than it came out of the can, you're ready to go. This thinned polyurethane flows out much better than thick poly straight out of the can, and any bubbles that form from the foam brushes will just pop on their own. This tool tote was one of the first Woodwork for Humans projects. It's made of soft white pine and it leads a hard life, so it needs maximum protection. I finish planed all the surfaces of the tote when I first made it, so it just needs a quick sanding with 220 grit. As I'm working, I also check the surface by hand to make sure that everything is smooth. Your eye could miss rough spots in the wood, but your sense of touch won't. After I sand, I wipe off all the dust with a paper towel soaked in mineral spirits. And then you might notice that I'm doing the actual finishing up in my kitchen. Dust in the air in your shop will ruin any film finish, so I just don't do any finishing down in the shop. I apply my finishes in a clean environment, and they come out better with a lot less trouble. Here, I'm applying the first coat of polyurethane fast. It mostly soaks in and seals the wood, so there's no need to be super careful. I do level out the finish after I'm done with each section, so I don't get any giant drips or sags, but even that is done very quickly. I let this first coat dry just for a couple of hours, and then I get a second coat on. Thinned polyurethane usually needs 4 coats instead of 3, but you can sneak in 2 coats per day by doing 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and letting it dry overnight. I'll do 4 coats in 2 days by doing 2 coats per day and be ready to buff on the 3rd day. On this project, the first 2 coats of poly raise the grain a lot, and this happens frequently. The surface feels very rough to the touch, so I sand it back down lightly with 220 grit and remove any dust with mineral spirits on a paper towel. Then I put on another 2 coats of thinned polyurethane. On these last coats, I'm paying really careful attention to my show surfaces. This is where the finish will really be on display, and it pays to get things right. I'm not going to even try to apply my top coats to a slanting surface like this side. I'm just asking for drips and sags if I do that. Instead, I'll take blocks of scrap wood to get that surface elevated and horizontal. I get the finish on, and then I work it again with the brush to smooth it out. I also get some light coming in from the side. This is called a raking light, and it really helps you catch dry spots and sags and fix them before they can harden. I usually go over each coat of polyurethane a couple of times with a mostly dry brush. The thinned polyurethane is very forgiving, and you can sort of keep working on it until you have a very even and level coat. I'll let this surface dry until it's just set up and solid. Then I can flip the thing over and work on another surface, but I'm very careful not to ding or scratch the poly that's still soft and in the middle of drying. After the project has 4 coats and a chance to dry overnight, I lightly sand the whole thing with 220 or 320 grit sandpaper. I wipe off the dust, and then it's just like the shellac. I put on wax with steel wool, and then buff it with a soft cotton or a microfiber cloth. And I'm done. Even this cheap, banged up pine has a nice, mellow glow, and it's going to stay looking good for years. Follow this finishing recipe for a piece of nice furniture that you make, and you will always enjoy looking at it. So listen, there are so many finishes out there, so many techniques and recipes, and so many people who will tell you, oh, you have to do things exactly this way. It's very easy to get confused. I cut through all the garbage by focusing on a small handful of inexpensive, durable products, and I've practiced with them a lot, so I know what to do. I recommend you do the same thing. Get a couple of different things and practice with them on scrap wood. Develop techniques that work for you. Learn how to use your own judgment when finishing. That's what matters. Honestly, I'm kind of quick when I finish. I move fast, and I'm not as fussy as a lot of other woodworkers I know, but my finishes still come out well. Even on high-dollar client pieces, I've never once had a complaint about my surface finish. So I know I'm on the right track with the techniques that I've developed. And listen, a video like this would be impossible without Patreon. Doing a deep dive into a topic like finishing requires research, days of shooting, tons of editing, and just a lot of time. I'd never have that time if it weren't for my patrons. They give me the support to give you a detailed look at a complicated topic. They're the heart of this channel. If you'd like to be a part of unsponsored, independent DIY videos like this, go on over to patreon.com/RexKruger and check out the early access, exclusive content, and rewards that I have only for my patrons. And before I go, I think this is more or less my 100th YouTube video, which is a huge milestone, and I'm really excited about having done that many videos. I'd like to celebrate video 100 by recognizing one of the unsung heroes of this channel, my buddy Paul. He was one of my first subscribers, one of the first people to trust me on Patreon, and he's been sort of my unofficial business manager the entire time. He's always giving me ideas, making suggestions, telling me new directions I think I can take my business. And I think this is really amazing and generous of him because, frankly, I'm a lousy friend. I don't really know why he does it. But either way, Paul, this video is dedicated to you. And for all of my viewers, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.